I sold my apartment to teach my entitled son a lesson. Hi, I'm Lorraine. I'm 66 and I live in Chicago. I spent 4 decades building a life I could be proud of, raising my only son, teaching at a local school, and pouring every penny into the apartment I called home for 30 years. But recently, I came to a painful realization. Sometimes, love alone isn't enough to raise a decent human being. My son Drew used to be the light of my life. Now, he treats me like a burden, like I owe him something for simply being his mother. What I did next might shock you, but I don't regret a single second of it. If this story resonated with your soul, hit the subscribe button and let me know in the comments which country you're listening from. The sting of Vanessa's arrest for fraud and forgery, her attempt to refinance my home with a forged signature, her theft of $8,000, her abandonment on Christmas for a Hawaii trip with Derek Holt, had reshaped me. Months later, my recovery from a fractured hip was steady, supported by a nurse and the kindness of neighbors like Mr. Leroy. Vanessa's sentence, house arrest, and financial ethics classes felt like justice, but rewriting my will to leave my Tacoma house to Hope Haven, a charitable trust for abandoned elder women, was my triumph. My final notebook entry, May 15th, new will, Hope Haven Trust, Vanessa out, marked my freedom. Her Mele Kalikimaka post a fading echo. I'd faced her, told her to walk through her consequences, and found peace in sketching, book clubs, and new friends like Ellen and Rosa. Yet the question lingered. Would Vanessa ever grasp what she'd lost? Not just the house, but me. In August, Vanessa called again, her voice softer, the ankle monitor's hum faint. I was knitting in my apartment, the Puget Sound glinting outside, when my phone buzzed. "Mom," she said, "I'm out of house arrest. Classes are done. Can we meet? I want to make things right." I paused, my needles still. Her "I'm sorry" from months ago ringing hollow. "Lunch," I said, my tone calm. "Tomorrow, my place, 1 p.m. She arrived on time, her hair shorter, her eyes wary but hopeful. I'd made soup, set the table with my mother's china, a quiet assertion of my space. "You look good, Mom," she said, hugging me, her touch tentative. "Your hip's better." "Much," I said, gesturing to the table. "Sit, eat." We ate, her small talk, work, therapy, filling the silence. I watched her, my heart torn between the daughter I'd raised and the woman who'd betrayed me. She leaned forward, her voice low. "Mom, I was wrong. Derek." He twisted me up, but I let him. "I'm trying to be better. Can we start over?" I sipped my tea, her words tempting but thin. "You left me bedridden, Vanessa," I said, my voice steady. "Took my money, tried to take my home. Words aren't enough, show me." Her eyes welled, but she nodded. "I will, I promise." A knock interrupted us, sharp and official. I stood, my cane unnecessary now, and opened the door. Frank Harper stood there, a plainclothes officer beside him, Detective Morris from the case. Vanessa froze, her spoon clattering. "What's this?" she whispered. Frank's eyes met mine, his voice firm. "Vanessa Jennings, we're here to discuss additional charges, evidence of prior withdrawals, $12,000 over 2 years, surfaced in the bank's audit. You're under investigation for ongoing fraud." Vanessa screamed, her chair toppling as she stood. "No, I told you it was Derek. Mom, tell them." She lunged for the back door, but Morris was quicker, blocking her. "Don't run," he said, his hand on her arm. I sat, my hands folded, my voice cold. "You thought I'd forget, Vanessa. You took from me long before Hawaii. Now face it." Her tears streamed, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was scared, in debt. Mom, please." Frank held up a file. "Your text to Derek, planning the withdrawals, go back years. The court's reopening the case. You're not walking away this time." Morris cuffed her, her sobs echoing as they led her out. Frank lingered, his hand on my shoulder. "You okay, Ruth?" "I am," I said, my throat tight. She needed to know I'm not her victim. He nodded. The trust set, Hope Havens funded. You're untouchable now. I'll keep you posted on her case. I wrote in my notebook, August 12. Vanessa investigated again. Prior fraud. Hope Havens secure. The lunch, her fake remorse, her scream. They confirmed what I'd feared. Vanessa's betrayal wasn't a moment, but a pattern. Years of theft masked by her smile. Why? Debt, as she claimed? Or a deeper flaw? I'd never know, but I didn't need to. Hope Haven, my legacy, would help women like me. While Vanessa faced her choices, I stood by my window, sketching the sound, my life full. Ellen's book club, Rosa's picnics, Leroy's burgers. I'd given Vanessa my heart, my home, and she'd left me in pain. Now, I'd given her justice, a wake-up call, louder than any ocean breeze. As I drew, I smiled, knowing I'd earned her respect, not through her love, but through my strength. The gift was mine, a life rebuilt, a trust for others, a daughter left to learn what she'd lost. The sting of finding $4,500 missing from my hidden safe. Drew's dismissive, "Do you really think I'd steal from my own mother?" echoing in my ears, shifted something deep within me. At 66, I'd given my son everything. My Chicago apartment, my savings, my heart, only to become a stranger in my own home. His 6-month temporary stay, loud parties, and the sale of my favorite armchair, it made the place look old, had eroded my patience. My notebook entry, June 15th, $4,500 gone. Drew denies it. I'm done. Marked the turning point. I'd moved my precious belongings to my friend Diane's place. My resolve hardening. Drew's entitlement, his insult that I didn't need this space, wasn't just disrespect. It was a betrayal of the decades I'd spent raising him. I wasn't his landlord. I was his mother. And I'd teach him what that meant. A week later, I sat Drew down in the kitchen, the morning light glinting off the counter where my armchair once stood. My voice was calm, my hands folded to hide their tremble. "Drew, it's time for you to leave," I said. "You've been here 6 months. You need to find your own place." He laughed, leaning back in his chair, his coffee mug dangling. "You'd really kick me out? Where am I supposed to go, Mom? My lease isn't ready yet." "You've had time," I said, my tone steady. "You don't pay rent, don't help with groceries, and you sold my things. This isn't working." His laugh faded, his eyes narrowing. "Come on, you don't need all this space anyway. You barely use the living room. You could always sell this place, get a smaller one. That'd solve everything." I tilted my head, pretending to consider it, my heart racing but my face serene. "Maybe," I said, sipping my tea. "I'll think about it." He smirked, satisfied, and grabbed his phone. Already distracted, I watched him. His words, "Sell this place," a spark to my plan. He thought I was bluffing, that I'd cave like always. But the missing $4,500, his parties, his insults, they were a line he'd crossed. That night, alone in my bedroom, I pulled out a business card from Mr. Patel, a realtor who'd offered to buy my apartment last year. I dialed, my voice low. "Hi, Mr. Patel. Is your offer on the table still valid?" "Yes, Lorraine," he said, his tone eager. "Market's hot. I can offer $50,000 above your asking. Cash, quick close. You ready?" "I am," I said, my resolve iron. "Let's meet tomorrow. Keep it quiet." I hung up, my notebook open. June 22nd, told Drew to leave. He laughed, suggested selling. Called Patel. Offer good. Drew's ultimatum had backfired. He'd handed me the idea himself. I'd sell the apartment, his safety net, and let him face the world he thought he could manipulate. The suspense of keeping it secret, his parties, his late nights, tightened my chest. But I was ready. 2 weeks later, the sale moved fast. Mr. Patel's buyer, a young couple, wanted the apartment immediately, offering cash and a 10-day close. I met Patel at his office, signing papers while Drew was out, my friend Diane helping me pack quietly. I moved my clothes, my mother's teapot, my teaching awards to her spare room, each box a step toward freedom. The apartment, my home for 30 years, was no longer mine, but I felt no regret, only clarity. Drew's entitlement, "Why are you acting like a landlord?" had pushed me to this, and I'd make him feel the weight of his words. On closing day, I woke early. The apartment stripped to essentials. Movers arrived at dawn, boxing what remained: kitchenware, books, Drew's clutter, while he slept off another late night. By noon, the living room was stacked with boxes, the buyer's keys due tomorrow. I sat on the couch, my cane across my lap, waiting. Drew stumbled out at 1 p.m., his hair mussed, eyes bleary. He froze, staring at the boxes, the bare walls. "What the hell?" he muttered, turning to me. "Wait, you're serious?" I nodded, my voice calm. "The apartment sold, Drew. Buyers take possession tomorrow." He laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "I thought you were bluffing. You actually sold it? What about me?" "You'll figure it out," I said, meeting his gaze, just like I had to. His face reddened, his voice rising. "This is my home, Mom. You can't just— Where am I supposed to go? You're screwing me over." "You screwed yourself," I said, my tone cold. 6 months, no rent, no help. You sold my armchair, took $4,500 from my safe. This isn't your playground." He paced, hands in his hair. "I didn't take your money, and the chair was junk. You're punishing me for nothing." I stood, leaning on my cane, my heart heavy but firm. "You called me a landlord, said I didn't need this place, so I took your advice. Now go." He stared, his jaw tight, then grabbed his jacket and stormed out, the door slamming. No goodbye, no apology, just silence. I sank back, the apartment's emptiness a mirror to our bond. My notebook entry, July 6th, sold apartment, Drew gone, no apology, the $4,500, his parties, his laughter at my request for help. Why had he turned on me? Was it entitlement or something deeper? The question hung, but I'd acted, and he'd face the lesson alone. I moved to Diane's that night, her guest room a temporary haven. The sale money, wired to a new account, was my future. Maybe a condo, a trip, a life for me. I thought of Drew's shock, his "what about me?" A child's cry from a 35-year-old man. Would he learn or just resent me? The suspense of his next move, anger, pleading, silence, loomed. But I was free. I'd taught at a school for decades, raised a son alone, and now I'd teach him the hardest lesson. Respect isn't owed, it's earned. I sat with Diane, her kitchen warm, and shared the story. "You did what you had to," she said, pouring wine. "He'll come around, or he won't. But you're not his doormat." I nodded, my mother's teapot on her counter, a reminder of my roots. Drew's departure, his silence, was his choice, just as selling was mine. I'd given him this apartment, my love, and he'd thrown it back. Now I'd live for myself, the city's pulse, outside a promise of what was next. My notebook waited, ready for the future, and as I sipped wine, I knew. I'd sold his safety net, but I'd gained my worth. The echo of Drew's slammed door, his furious "what about me?" as he stormed out after I sold our Chicago apartment, lingered like a bruise. I'd given him 6 months to leave, endured his parties, his sale of my armchair, and the $4,500 stolen from my safe, only for him to laugh at my ultimatum. "You'd really kick me out?" The sale to Mr. Patel's buyer, the movers boxing up 30 years of my life while he slept, was my answer. My notebook entry, July 6th, sold apartment, Drew gone, no apology, marked my break from his entitlement. At 66, I'd raised him alone, poured my teaching salary into that home. But his dismissal, "You don't need all this space," pushed me to teach him a lesson. Why had he turned so callous? Was it greed, resentment, or something I'd missed? I'd moved to Diane's guest room, the sale money in a new account, my future open but uncertain. Weeks later, I didn't settle for the tiny one-bedroom everyone expected. I found a guest house in Evanston, a quiet suburb north of Chicago. Its ivy-covered walls and small garden, a haven. The lease was signed under a new name, Lorraine Ellis, my mother's maiden name, on the mailbox. a shield against Drew's reach. The space was modest: a bedroom, a kitchenette, a porch overlooking a maple tree. I unpacked my mother's teapot, my teaching awards, my sketches, each item a root in this peaceful, quiet, free life. My notebook entry, July 20th, moved to Evanston Guest House. New name, no word from Drew. The city's hum was distant, replaced by birdsong, and I felt lighter, unburdened by the son who'd made me a stranger in my own home. I joined a local art class, my pencils tracing the lake's edge, and volunteered at a community garden, my hands in soil beside retirees like Clara, who shared stories of her travels. Diane visited weekends, her laughter filling the porch as we sipped tea. "You're glowing," she said one evening, her eyes warm. "This place suits you." "It's mine," I said, smiling. No parties, no missing money, just me. I hadn't heard from Drew. No calls, no texts, no apologies. His silence was louder than his tantrum, a confirmation of the rift I'd carved. I wondered where he'd gone, back to his delayed lease, a friend's couch, or somewhere else. The question of his theft, "Do you really think I'd steal?" and his entitlement nod, but I pushed it aside, planting herbs, sketching waves, living for myself. The sale money, safe in my new account, was a promise. A condo maybe, or a trip to Italy. Dreams I'd shelved for Drew. In late August, my phone buzzed while I was pruning rosemary in the garden. It was Mrs. Carter, my former neighbor from the apartment building. Her voice hesitant. "Lorraine, I hope I'm not bothering you." "Never," I said, wiping dirt from my hands. "What's up?" She paused, her tone uneasy. "Your son came back yesterday, Drew. He was at the building, knocking on your old door. Thought you'd gone on vacation, I guess, when the new owners told him you sold the place. He lost it. Started yelling in the hallway, saying you couldn't do this to him. It was his home. Security had to escort him out." My heart quickened, but my voice stayed calm. "What did he say exactly?" "He was shouting. She had no right." "That was mine too. Kept asking where you went." "Nobody knew, of course." "He looked desperate, Lorraine. I thought you should know." I thanked her, my mind racing as I hung up. Drew's outburst, "That was mine too," echoed his, "You don't need all this space." He hadn't learned. He'd doubled down, his entitlement flaring when he found his safety net gone. "Lorraine, good to hear from you. What's up?" "I need to update my will," I said, my hands steady on my cane. "Drew's in trouble, asking to come back. I want my assets locked down, no inheritance for him." She paused, papers rustling. "You're sure?" "No contact at all." "None," I said, my resolve firm. "He lived in my apartment, didn't pay rent, sold my things, took $4,500. I sold the place to teach him a lesson, and he's still not sorry. I want my money, my new home, everything. To go to a cause, not him." "All right," she said, her tone shifting to business. "What cause?" "A scholarship fund," I said, the idea forming as I spoke. "For Chicago teachers' kids, single-parent homes. I taught for 30 years. Those families need it more than Drew." Karen whistled softly. "That's a legacy, Lorraine. I'll draft it. Your estate to the fund, Drew excluded." "You own anything now?" "Just savings from the sale," I said. "The guest house is rented. I might buy a condo later, but same deal. No Drew." "I'll need your bank details, lease copy," she said. "And Lorraine, if he's in trouble, he might push back. You got proof of the theft?" "Bank records, safe receipts," I said, the folder ready. "He denied it, but I know." "Good," she said. "Send them. I'll make this airtight." I hung up, my notebook open. September 29, called Karen, new will. Scholarship fund, Drew out. Sent proof. The voicemail replayed in my mind. I need a place to stay. But I saw his smirk, his, "You're acting like a landlord." He wasn't asking for forgiveness, just a lifeline, and I wasn't his anymore. I mailed Karen the documents, my evidence of the $4,500, and added a lock to my mailbox, a precaution against Drew's desperation. Days passed, No more calls from Drew. I sketched at the lake with Clara, her stories of her grandkids, a balm. You seem quieter, she said, her brush pausing. Family stuff. My son, I said, my pencil tracing waves. He's struggling, but I can't fix it. She nodded, her eyes kind. You fix you, Lorraine, that's enough. Her words echoed as I planted herbs in the community garden, Rosa's laughter mingling with the soil's scent. The guest house, my new name, my art, they were my shield. But Drew's trouble hung like a storm cloud. Was he in debt, running from something, or just playing me? Mrs. Carter's call, his hallway rant, suggested panic, not remorse. I checked my account daily, safe under my new name, and kept my phone close, ready for his next move. Karen emailed a week later. Will drafted, estate to Chicago Teachers Kids Fund, Drew excluded, signed tomorrow. I met her at her office, a small space downtown, and signed, my hand steady. You're doing right, she said, handing me a copy. This fund'll help kids like you did. Drew can't touch it. I nodded, my mother's teapot in my mind, a symbol of roots I'd replanted. He won't, I said. He's learning now. Back at the guest house, I wrote, October 5, signed new will. Drew's out, funds in. The voicemail, his mistake, was a plea I'd ignored. But the why he'd stolen, why he'd dismissed me, lingered. I didn't need his answers to live. I sketched, gardened, laughed with Diane over wine, her let him crash a mantra. The sale money, my new life, were mine, and Drew's lesson was his to learn. I stood on my porch, the maple's leaves falling, and felt peace. Drew's trouble, his hallway rage, his voicemail, they were his, not mine. I'd sold his safety net, taught him respect was earned, and as I drew the lake, I knew I was Lorraine, free, my guest house a home, my heart no longer his to break. The weight of Drew's voicemail, Mom, I'm in trouble, I need a place to stay, hung over my Evanston guest house like a distant storm, unanswered but not forgotten. I'd ignored his plea, updating my will with Karen Walsh to leave my estate to a scholarship fund for Chicago Teachers Kids, cutting him out entirely. My notebook entry, October 5, signed new will. Drew's out, funds in, sealed my resolve. The $4,500 he'd stolen from my safe, his parties, and his entitled, you don't need all this space, fueling my lesson. At 66, I'd sold our Chicago apartment to teach him respect wasn't owed. And my new life, sketching with Clara, gardening with Rosa, tea with Diane, was my reward. Mrs. Carter's call about his hallway outburst. She had no right. Showed his desperation, but his silence since suggested he'd moved on. Or had he? The question of his trouble lingered, a thread I couldn't tie. In mid-October, as I pruned herbs in my garden, a shadow fell across the soil. I looked up, my heart lurching. Drew stood at the gate, unannounced, uninvited, his jacket rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. He'd found me, despite my new name, Lorraine Ellis, on the mailbox. I stood, my pruning shears in hand, my voice calm but cold. Drew, how'd you get this address? He stepped closer, his hands raised, a forced smile flickering. I pictured him in the hallway, his face red, security looming, and felt a pang, not guilt, but sorrow for the boy he'd been, the man he wasn't. Why was he so desperate? Had he counted on the apartment, or was something else driving him? Debt, trouble. The question joined others, but I wrote in my notebook, August 25, Drew at old building, yelling. Thought I was on vacation, doesn't know where I am. I stood on my porch, the maple's leaves rustling, and called Diane. Drew showed up, I told her, recounting Mrs. Carter's call. He's angry, not sorry. She snorted, her voice sharp. Let him yell, you're not his ATM anymore, he'll figure it out, or crash trying. Her words steadied me, but the suspense of Drew's next move tightened my chest. Would he search for me, confront me, or disappear? I checked my new account, untouched, safe, and emailed Mr. Patel, confirming the sale's finality. The guest house, my new name, kept me hidden, but Chicago wasn't far, and Drew was reckless. I added a lock to my door, a precaution, and kept my phone close, ready for whatever he might do. The next day, I sketched at the lakefront, Clara beside me, her easel steady. "You seem distracted," she said, brushing paint from her hands. "Everything okay?" "Just family stuff," I said, my pencil pausing. "My son's struggling." She nodded, her eyes kind. "Kids can break your heart, but you've got to live for you, Lorraine. You're doing that here." I smiled, her words a mirror to my choice. The guest house, the garden, the art class, they were my life, not Drew's to claim. I thought of his hallway rant, his "she had no right," a child's tantrum, not a man's regret. The $4,500, his parties, his insults. Why had he turned on me? I didn't know, but I didn't need to. I'd sold his lesson, and he was learning it, one empty hallway at a time. Back home, I wrote, August 26, added lock. Drew's desperate, but I'm safe. The sale money, my new name, my quiet life, they were my shield. Drew's outburst was his, not mine. And as I sipped tea on my porch, the lake's breeze cool, I knew I'd taught him. Respect wasn't owed, but earned. Whether he'd learn or rage, I was free. My guest house a sanctuary, my heart no longer his to break. The quiet of my Evanston guest house, its ivy walls and maple tree a sanctuary, was a stark contrast to Drew's outburst at my old Chicago apartment. Mrs. Carter's call, his yelling in the hallway, "She had no right," that was mine too, revealed his desperation when he learned I'd sold the place he'd treated as his playground. At 66, I'd given him 6 months to leave, endured his parties, the sale of my armchair, and the $4,500 stolen from my safe, only for him to laugh at my ultimatum. "You'd really kick me out?" The sale to Mr. Patel's buyer, my move under a new name, Lorraine Ellis, and my notebook entry, August 25, Drew at old building, yelling, "Doesn't know where I am," marked my freedom from his entitlement. Why had he turned so callous? Debt, resentment, or something deeper? I didn't know. But the guest house, my art classes, and friends like Clara and Diane were my new roots. My life no longer his to disrupt. A month later, in late September, my phone buzzed as I sat on the porch, sketching the lake's horizon. A voicemail notification flashed, Drew's number. My heart quickened, but I steadied myself, pressing play. His voice, rough and low, filled the air. "Mom, it's me. I'm in trouble. I need a place to stay. I made a mistake. Please, call me back." The message ended, his tone a mix of panic and plea. Unlike the arrogance of, "What about me?" when I'd sold the apartment. I listened again, then a third time, each word heavy. Trouble, mistake. Was he sorry, or just cornered? I pictured him in that hallway, raging at the new owners, security escorting him out. The $4,500, his parties, his, "You don't need all this space." They flooded back, a reminder of his betrayal. He hadn't called to apologize, hadn't reached out in weeks, but now, in trouble, he wanted me again. I set the phone down, my sketchbook open, and wrote in my notebook, September 28, Drew's voicemail. "In trouble, wants to stay." No response. My silence was my answer. But my heart ached for the boy he'd been, not the man he'd become. I called Diane, my voice steady as I recounted the message. "He's desperate," I said, stirring tea in my kitchenette. "But I don't trust him, not after everything." "Good," she said, her tone sharp. "He didn't care when he was throwing parties, stealing your money. Let him fix his own mess." Her words grounded me, but the suspense of Drew's trouble gnawed. Was he broke, homeless, or worse? Why now, after a month of silence? I needed to protect myself, not just from his pleas, but from the mother's instinct to save him. The next morning, I dialed my lawyer, Ms. Karen Walsh, who'd handled my divorce years ago. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but brisk. "Mom, I asked around, old neighbors, Diane's friends. I needed to see you. Can we talk?" I wiped dirt from my hands, my pulse steady despite the intrusion. "You're here. Say what you want." He followed me to the porch, his steps heavy, and sat uninvited, his voice low. "Why are you punishing me?" I said I was sorry in that voicemail. "I'm in trouble. Lost my job. Got evicted. I need help, Mom. You're my family." I leaned against the railing. My guest house is quiet, shattered by his presence. "You were sorry you got caught," I said, my tone sharp. "That's not the same thing. You lived in my home, didn't pay rent, sold my armchair, took $4,500 from my safe. You laughed when I asked you to leave. You'd really kick me out? So I sold the apartment. That's not punishment, that's consequence." His face reddened, his hands clenching. "I didn't take your money, and the chair was junk. You're blowing this out of proportion. I'm your son. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It meant everything," I said, my voice steady. "I raised you alone, poured 30 years into that apartment, my teaching salary, my heart. You treated me like a landlord, said I didn't need the space. Now you're here because you're out of options, not because you're sorry." He stood, pacing, his voice rising. "I'm begging, Mom. I've got nowhere to go. You sold our home, my home. You can't just cut me off like this." I watched him, his desperation raw but familiar, echoing his hallway rant. That was mine too. I'd prepared for this. I reached into my pocket, pulling out an envelope I'd kept ready since Karen's will draft, my evidence tucked inside. "You don't get to beg now," I said, holding it out. "This is for you." He snatched it, tearing it open, his eyes scanning the letter I'd written. "Drew, I raised you to be kind, to respect people. You spat on that. You took my money, my home, my trust. You'll get nothing from me now. Not my savings, not my silence. The apartment's gone, my will's changed. Learn to stand without stepping on others. Lorraine." Tucked inside were copies of the bank records, the safe's receipt, proof of the $4,500 withdrawal he'd denied. His hands shook, his voice breaking. "You're disowning me? Over a few grand? A chair? You're my mother." "I was," I said, my heart aching but firm. "You chose to be a stranger. You laughed, stole, dismissed me. I sold the apartment to teach you respect isn't owed. It's earned. You haven't earned it." He crumpled the letter, his eyes wet, and stepped closer, his voice a plea. "I'm sorry, okay? I was stupid, stressed, broke. I didn't mean to hurt you. Let me stay, just a week. I'll make it right." I shook my head, my cane tapping the porch. "You had 6 months to make it right. You chose parties, theft, insults. Go figure it out, like I did." He stared, his jaw tight, then turned and walked away, the gate slamming behind him. No goodbye, just silence, heavier than his storming out months ago. I sank into a chair, my notebook open. October 15. Drew found me, begged, gave him letter, proof. He's gone. The confrontation, his "Why are you punishing me?" replayed. But I felt no regret, only clarity. Why had he turned on me? Debt, as he claimed, or a deeper flaw? I didn't need his answers to live. I called Diane, my voice steady. "Drew showed up," I said, recounting his pleas. "The letter. He's broke, evicted, but still not sorry." "Let him drown," she said, her tone fierce. "You gave him the truth. That's more than he deserves." Her words anchored me, but the suspense of Drew's next move lingered. Would he fight the will, track me again, or vanish? I checked my locks, my account, safe under my new name, and emailed Karen, confirming the will's strength. The scholarship fund, my legacy, was untouchable, built for kids who'd value it, unlike Drew. I thought of Clara's "you fix you" at the lake, Rosa's laughter in the garden, my guest house, my sketches, my new friends. They were my home, not his to claim. The next day, I sketched at the community center, Clara beside me, her easel steady. "You okay?" she asked, her brush pausing. "You seem heavy." "My son," I said, my pencil tracing waves. "He came by, asked for help. I sent him away." She nodded, her eyes soft. "Sometimes letting go's the kindest cut. You're thriving here, Lorraine." I smiled, her words a mirror to my peace. I gardened, laughed with Diane, framed a sketch for the art show. Drew's trouble, his begging, was his burden, not mine. The $4,500, his, "You're acting like a landlord," they were lessons he'd failed. And my letter was the final exam. I wrote, October 16, locks checked, will secure. Drew's on his own. The why he'd stolen, dismissed me, faded against my new life. I'd sold his safety net, faced his pleas, and stood firm. On my porch, the maple's leaves golden. I sipped tea, the lake's breeze cool. Drew's confrontation, his crumpled letter, was his last chance, and he'd walked away. I'd taught him respect was earned, and as I drew, I knew I was Lorraine, free, my guest house, a sanctuary, my heart my own. The confrontation with Drew, on my Evanston guest house porch, his desperate, "Why are you punishing me?" and my firm, "You were sorry you got caught," had severed the last thread of our bond. Handing him the letter, proof of his $4,500 theft tucked inside, and watching him walk away without apology cemented my choice to sell our Chicago apartment and cut him from my will. My notebook entry, October 15, Drew found me, begged, gave him letter, proof, he's gone, marked the end of his entitlement and the start of my peace. At 66, I'd poured 30 years into that home, raising him alone, only for his parties, insults, and "You don't need all this space" to push me to teach him respect was earned, not owed. Why had he turned so callous? Debt, as he claimed, or a deeper flaw? I didn't need his answers. Thriving in my new life with Clara's art classes, Rosa's garden, and Diane's friendship. Months later, in March, I sat in my guest house garden, sipping tea, the maple tree budding with spring. The Evanston air was crisp, the lake's breeze carrying the scent of my rosemary plants. My sketches lined the porch, my mother's teapot gleamed in the kitchenette, and my notebook rested inside. February 10, scholarship fund active. No word from Drew. The sale money, safe under my new name, Lorraine Ellis, had funded my rent and a donation to the Chicago Teachers Kids Fund, my will ensuring it would grow after me. Drew's silence since our confrontation, no calls, no visits, was his choice, just as my freedom was mine. A young woman approached the garden gate, her face familiar from the community center. She wore a teacher's lanyard, her smile warm. "Mrs. Lorraine?" she said, pausing. "I'm Mia, from the school fund. I wanted to thank you again for your donation." The kids were so happy. New books, art supplies, even a trip to the museum. I set my tea down, my heart lifting. "Mia, it's good to see you," I said, standing, my cane long gone. "I'm glad it helped. Those kids deserve it." "They do," she said, her eyes bright. "Your gift covered 20 scholarships this year, single-parent families, just like you said. I wish you could have seen their faces." I smiled, the weight of Drew's "what about me?" fading against her words. "Thank you," I said. "I've wasted enough time on people who take and take. It feels good to give to someone who actually appreciates it." Mia nodded, her hand on the gate. "You're a hero to them. If you ever want to visit, just say the word." "I might," I said, waving as she left. I sat back, the garden's quiet wrapping around me, and felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. The fund, my legacy, was helping kids I'd taught, families like mine, while Drew, with his parties and theft, got nothing. His hallway rant, "She had no right," and his begging, "I'm in trouble," were shadows, powerless against my new life. I thought of Diane's "Let him drown," and Clara's "You fix you." They'd been right. I'd sold the apartment, faced Drew's pleas, and redirected my love to those who valued it. My notebook entry that evening, March 20th, Mia thanked me for fund. Kids happy. I'm free. The why Drew stole, why he dismissed me, didn't matter anymore. He'd learned his lesson, or he hadn't, but I wasn't his doormat. I sketched the lake later, Rosa beside me at the community center, her laughter warm. "You're glowing," she said, tossing soil from her gloves. "What's the secret?" "Giving," I said, my pencil steady. "To the right people." She grinned, not pressing, and I felt the truth settle. I'd given Drew everything, my home, my heart, and he'd spat on it. Now, I gave to Mia's kids, to my garden, to myself, and it filled me. The suspense of Drew's fate. Would he resurface, fight, or fade? Dissolved in the lake's light. Karen's will, my evidence of his theft, ensured he'd never touch my legacy. I was Lorraine, 66, not a landlord, but a woman who'd stood up. As I sipped tea on my porch, the maple's buds bright, I smiled. Drew's lesson had cost him his safety net, but it had given me freedom. The fund, Mia's gratitude, my sketches, they were my payoff. Proof I'd chosen well. I'd taught him respect was earned, and in doing so, earned my own. The garden hummed, the lake sparkled, and I was home, truly free. If this story reminded you that peace is priceless, hit that subscribe button. And if you've ever had to reclaim your life, tell me how in the comments. I read every one.